Hi, my name is Jeff Lush, and welcome to the Zero Trust series. We're going to talk about different questions and answers related to zero trust architectures within your environment. Some key attributes of how do we implement, what's the impact, what is zero trust, and how does it work with other advanced technologies like SDN, for example, or network mapping and things of that nature. So stay tuned. We're going to jump right to this episode of the Zero Trust series. In today's episode of the Zero Trust series, we're going to talk about culture adoption. So how do you get the culture? And what I'm talking about here are all of the users, everybody and everything that is impacted by a zero trust architecture. How do you get everyone to work together to truly see value in the implementation? Because the reality is it's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be some discomfort associated with implementing a zero trust security model. And you want to make sure that the culture is ready and that you can support that culture moving forward. Remember, it's not about necessarily the strength of the technical implementation that you will be remembered for. It will be how the people accepted the technology that you implemented. So let's talk about a few strategies here. So I'm going to go through, let me see here, 6 different key bullet points related to zero trust and how that we can make this cultural change within the environment. So zero trust culture, remember, this is a security model that requires all users and devices, both inside and outside of your organization, to be authenticated and authorized before they can access any resources. And when we speak of resources, we're talking about data, applications, anything that is within your environment. So adopting a zero trust culture can be a challenge, but here are some suggestions that you and your organization may want to put in place to ease this pain a little. Suggestion 1, establish a strong security policy. So define for your organization security policies and over communicate those policies to all people that will be impacted. And what I mean by over communicate, I mean literally over communicate. Do it through a bulletin, an email. If you're going to do a email or bulletin, pick a time every week and a day every week that you disseminate information related to your security policies as it relates to zero trust. A consistent delivery of this information will go a long way for your users. They will grow and adapt to receiving the information at that time. Make it weekly. Don't make it daily, for example, or it may be every other week or once a month. Whatever it is, deliver it consistently. In addition, you want to be able to put that information somewhere that catalogs, excuse me, I can't believe I couldn't say that catalogs the information by date so that people can go out and reference it. An example, if you're using a Microsoft environment, you may want to create a SharePoint environment where you can post that information. You could also use Sway or other types of tools within the Office 365 suite to post that information. The bottom line here, you want people to have quick and easy access to your policies for your organization. This policy, and within the policy, you should outline what is expected of everyone, from faculty if you're running an education environment, to students, or from leadership to employees. Whatever it is, define everything that's expected in terms of security and what they as individuals can and cannot do with the company's data and resources. Now, much of this training, and that's what this kind of splashes into, we want to establish the policies and communicate them as we spoke of earlier. And then the training, now they may be receiving this in other venues within your organization. A lot of organizations talk about security breaches and PII and CUI data and how to deal with those. So loop that as reference points into your policies. When you establish them, say, hey, here's additional training as well, and put that in your messaging. And before we move on to the next topic, when you establish this security policy and you communicate it to everyone, do it in brief, succinct messages with additional references using a web link to a page within, for example, SharePoint. That will allow your users to engage quickly and disengage, or dig deeper if they like. Number 2, identify and classify all assets. This is probably one of the most challenging things to do when implementing a zero trust environment, but it's critical because from a cultural perspective, you want to make sure that you get everything. So when I talk about identify and classify assets, we're really talking about all of your organization's assets. This includes data, applications, systems, devices, anything. And then you need to determine which of these assets are most critical and require the highest level of protection. Now, you want to be able to establish this because as you implement within the environment, this is not going to happen overnight. So you want to be able to find your highest risk target and go after them first, and then work your way down. Again, over-communicating the entire time with everyone that will be impacted. Now, it's important to create this asset map, and within many of your organizations, you may already be running tools that create inventory. This, again, is a challenging thing to do. But once you get your hands around it, now you'll have an inventory of all assets, and then it's strongly suggested that you implement some form of an ITIL process, for example. Could be any process flow that will understand changes to the environment, accept those changes, and be able to update that information so that you can identify and classify assets. All right, let's move to the next one. Implement strong access controls. Now, implementing strong access controls are going to limit access to your organization's resources. So some examples of this may be for multi-factor authentication, role-based access controls, and regular audits to ensure that access privileges are appropriate and accountable. Now, what's a great example of implementing strong access controls? Look in the NIST, that's NIST, NIST controls, NIST 800-53, for example. The AC family, or access control family, has all of the controls, and it lists for you what the control name is, how to implement it, and then how to check on it. So take advantage of that free resource, what I believe is probably the world's best index and library of security controls. So leverage the NIST controls. All right, number 4, monitor and analyze the activity. You have to implement continuous monitoring within your environment. Analyze activity across the organization, and this will allow you to detect and respond to threats in real time. Now, does this work on large organizations? It can, if implemented correctly. Continuous monitoring, again, there is a NIST publication, and I know I'm referring to NIST because I am a U.S. federal guy, but they do have some great data and ideas. Now, I believe it's NIST 800-37 or -137. I'd have to look it up. I'm not looking at it right now. So one of those two have the rules on continuous monitoring. And the controls and measures that you need to implement in order to have continuous monitoring in your environment. Remember, we're going to go back to that identify and classify assets, the second step. We're going to go back to that and say, hey, where are my high-risk targets? Well, those are the ones I'm going to do continuous monitoring on first, and I'm then going to work my way through the stack. All right, number 5, train your employees. Train, train, train. Train all the employees on the importance of security and their role in maintaining a zero trust culture. This might include in training on how to identify and respond to phishing emails, for example, how to use strong passwords, how to report suspicious activities, what a good URL is and a bad URL. All of these things are examples of training the employees and getting them to embrace and be more accountable for the zero trust architecture and culture within your environment. You will fail without the support and training of everyone that is within the zero trust environment. And then the last, certainly but not least, is continuous improvement. Zero trust is not a set up once and forget. Whenever I think of zero trust, I think of driving on Interstate 10 in the United States. Interstate 10 goes from coast to coast, from the West Coast to the East Coast. And you can drive on it the whole way. And never have I ever traveled on Interstate 10 and not been slowed down by construction on that interstate. Why? Because that interstate spans over, I'm thinking, about 3,000 miles, a little over 3,000 miles, and it's in a constant improvement. I don't know if this is the case, but maybe they start in California, and by the time they end up in Florida, California already needs improvements done, and they start over again. So it's continuous monitoring and improvement of your organization's security policy. This might include security assessments, vulnerability testing, penetration testing. All of these things will aid in your implementation and your culture adoption of zero trust architecture. Thank you for taking the time today to view this video series on zero trust. We hope that it was valuable to you and that you'll stay tuned and view the other Zero Trust episodes found on this YouTube channel.